They say that serious speakers shouldn't tell jokes. So here's one for you. Have you heard the one where they describe heaven is where all the mechanics are German, and all the police are British, and all the lovers are French, and all the chefs are Italian, and it's all organized by the Swiss? And then hell, on the contrast, all the mechanics are French, all the police are German, all the lovers are Swiss. No offense if you're Swiss. All the chefs are British. And it's all organized by the Italians. Right? And this, what we've just experienced just now, is the nature of implicit bias, in my opinion. And if you laughed at this, you have it too. That's the nature of implicit bias. It's funny. This is a funny joke because we actually see some truth in those stereotypes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be funny to us. We've all experienced some sort of something, or maybe see it in us. So, I'm just a pianist, and I don't know anything. I have no knowledge about this sort of thing, and this very large and serious topic of implicit bias. But today I'm going to focus very short on a very small portion of this, just with using my opinion. We did some interviews prior to getting the symposium ready for you, and we interviewed artists and such, and the person that I interviewed was somebody maybe you know, John Nakamatsu, who's a very wonderful pianist in California, Japanese heritage. And one of the things that he said that really stuck out, and I think this was the reason why Jerry wanted us to just at least mention it. And I asked him, did you experience any discrimination or anything in your life, in your career? And he said, when I was doing those competitions, and unfortunately sometimes even today, he hears people and judges and presenters saying, Japanese people can't play Chopin. That's what he heard. I think that stereotype started this way, because my belief is that musical performance, the way we perform music, has a lot to do with our language, our native language that we were speaking and that we speak. So spoken prosody, the stresses and the intonation patterns in speech, it leaves an imprint on the music of that culture. So, for example, in the French language, you stress generally the last syllable. In Polish, it's penultimate. It's the second to the last syllable. And in Japanese, it's actually every syllable. So think about that, right? So that maybe if that's all the training that you've had in that place, that's possibly, maybe that is the place the way I played as well. But then there's this thing called globalization that happened, right? And so for me, for example, I think what they call a 0.5 generation. 1.5. Am I 1.5? I'm not sure if that's even true, because I was 9 years old when my parents immigrated to the United States with me from Korea. Is that 1.5 or is that 0.5? 1.5, okay. So then John is a second generation Japanese, of course. And then Jerry over here is so far gone, he's practically Irish now. Yeah. So,
I played the boron better than I played the taiko.
That's right. So how do we stereotype that now, right? We all look the same and we have the same heritage, but yet globalization has changed us. And so if just using myself as an example, it's just all that I can use, is that when I was 9 and I started, of course, all my serious piano training, music training here in this country, and it wasn't until when I was in college, really, that I started to have, my dreams started to be in English. And I just recently realized that now I count in English. But for the longest time I counted in Korean, otherwise I couldn't do it. I couldn't do any multiplications, anything else, unless I did it in Korean, because that was how I was taught as a 6-year-old. But now I've realized that it's finally happened. I have kind of clunked over to English. So I'm pretty much westernized now, to the chagrin of my parents, of course. But this is the way it is. And I'd like to think that has made me play better. You know, because going back to the theory of the whole language thing, you know, if I've assimilated this Western language, then I think it's going to make me play better these things. I hope so. Nakamatsu also suggests that it's not so much the performer, but it's the audience that we should try. I mean, I'm speaking specifically really to classical concerts, for example. It's the audience that we should try to diversify. And so isn't that the truth? And in classical music, diversity in a performer, for example, is not so necessary or forced just for the sake of diversity. Now, gender diversity is something else, and that's a whole other symposium that we can have about that, which I do believe there's holding some water in that. But you know, I personally would like to hear Beethoven the way it was meant to be, not in some other diverse way, right? So if my semi-theory of language that I spoke about is to be accepted, then I think we should celebrate this different culture and the way we perform as much as possible, right? So we had the Russian National Orchestra last year, all Russians, 80 Russians, conductor, everything. And they played Firebird, they played Tchaikovsky, and when they were demanded to play an encore, they played the Khachaturian Masquerade. And this is a piece I'm sure that they've all heard and played since they were babies. And they were just playing along, and I'm telling you, that was the best performance of that piece I have ever heard, right? And, you know, and I'm not ashamed to say that I want to hear the Strauss waltzes played by the Vienna Philharmonic, right? For that same exact reason. And I don't think we should feel un-PC about saying that or feel embarrassed. Maybe people look at me funny, but I don't feel embarrassed when I say that because I think there are differences, and we should celebrate those differences because that's what brings out the thing in all of us, the difference in all of us. And I'm going to conclude now by telling you this little story this little statement that I heard from an elementary teacher once that really stuck with me. And she said, you know, when I'm teaching in front of my children, this whole thing about diversity and racial relationships, I feel like I've succeeded if I can get my students to see no color. And I don't know about you, but I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Because we need to see color. And as a person of minority, I want people to know that I'm different or that I bring a different set of ideas and culture. So we shouldn't want everything to be the same. Otherwise, why are we here today talking about diversity, right? Because if the goal is to have everyone be the same, then why diversify at all? Because no one's bringing anything new to the table. So I'd like us to say that, to see that. So going back to, as a finish, going back to the joke, I think the point that I want to make then is, if you agree with me, of course, it's that I think maybe we should just try to make sure that we always create heaven and not focus on the hell. Thanks.